welcome back to Plant and Water. We're going to continue our fruit for thought, specifically with the fruit of the Spirit concerning gentleness. And it's where the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness. And next week, Lord willing, we'll talk about self-control. Against such things, there is no law. So gentleness. JJ, what do you think about when you hear gentleness?
Well, if we're comparing it to a fruit,
yeah,
and you won't see it because it's hidden over here behind the nest.
Oh yeah, it's hidden. Yeah,
I think
behind the
peach.
Coconut too.
You know, a peach. You got to be gentle with a peach.
Yes.
You know,
can't bruise a peach.
You can't bruise a peach.
They bruise easy. Mm-hmm. They do. So maybe more timid than,
a little
than
peachy,
most.
But
yeah, it's the peach fuzz. It makes it more timid. You know. In fact, I think when there's a world perspective on gentle. Is like meek, and the idea of mild, that someone is a pushover, and that is the farthest from what this is saying here, and it's actually someone who is extremely strong, but has that under control. So it's the idea of meekness, that it's strength under control, which will bring us into who gives us the control. That's again next week. Self-control is also a result of trusting in something bigger than self. But we're going to look here, and I'd like to look, the word specifically is the quality of not being overly impressed by a sense of one's self-importance. So someone who is gentle is not going to be overly impressed with themselves. You know, I immediately thought about the camera roll that somebody has. You know, we all have our own camera roll. Mm-hmm. You know, sometimes you'll see on social media, share the last picture you took, you know, and just to get people, you know, because everybody has a camera roll. Mm-hmm. But based on this, selfies wouldn't be on that camera roll. You know, the idea of being overly impressed by someone's self-importance. This definition came about before selfies ever, that word was ever coined. The idea of not being overly impressed with self, constantly looking at self and seeing different angles and say, man, I look good. That's this idea. It's the opposite of that. But there's also the idea of humility, courtesy, considerateness, and meekness that we already mentioned. To be considerate of others and not expecting others to be considerate of me, myself, and I. So the idea of humility, you know, if you were offered the humility award, you know, would you accept it?
Yes, I would.
No. Why, thank you.
Why, thank you.
I'm so glad you noticed that. I've always thought that about myself.
Yeah. How do you make that happen?
Right. Can't make that happen.
Here's the humility.
Immediately that award needs to be torn up. Right. So we get, there is that balance that needs to be there, and we find it through God. Again, the result, the fruit of the Spirit. And there's an individual that I want us to talk about that really shows this, really showcased this, and that's Moses. He, in fact, was referred to as the meekest man in all the earth at the time. And so, can you read that for us, JJ, Numbers 12, 1 through 9?
Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman who he had married, for he had married a Cushite woman. And they said, has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also? And the Lord heard it. Now the man Moses was very meek, more than all people who were on the face of the earth. And suddenly the Lord said to Moses and Aaron and Miriam, come out, you three, to the tent of meeting. And the three of them came out. And the Lord came down in a pillar of cloud and stood at the entrance of the tent and called Aaron and Miriam, and they both came forward. And he said, hear my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, make myself known to him in a vision. I speak with him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. With him I speak mouth to mouth, clearly, and not in riddles. And he beholds the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? And the anger of the Lord was kindled against them, and he departed.
Thank you very much. We wonder why is it that Miriam and Aaron, his brother and sister, have a problem with their new sister-in-law? This is a family issue. And I think it's interesting, Cushite, we know that Cush was a descendant of Canaan, who was a descendant of Ham, of Noah. And so also the Cushite people were settled in Africa. So we know that her skin would have been a darker complexion. And it's possible, of course, Moses would have a darker complexion as well. Mm-hmm. But it could be their problem is because, well, it says it's because she's a Cushite woman. It could be because of her skin. That could be a reason. And I find it interesting that the punishment Miriam has, and it seems that she's the one that has the biggest problem because she's the one that gets the punishment, is based on her skin. Mm. Her punishment is in her skin. And so that's a whole nother discussion. But notice it said that Moses was very meek, more than all people who were on the face of the earth. He's the meekest man who ever lived. But notice this is something that God had said about Moses. And so he doesn't say a word. He allows them to say these things about his wife. There's obviously a reason he's married her. I would be pretty upset, if at the wedding, my sister said something about my bride. I'd be like, what are you talking about? What? And so there would be this, I'd be up in arms about it. Well, he doesn't say a word, and then it explains why, because he was the meekest man on the face of the earth. But what's interesting is someone does come to his aid, and it's God. God takes a stand for Moses. Mm-hmm. And there's a picture here of vengeance is mine, I'll repay, says the Lord. It's God that we place that in his hands. And so it's not up to us to get up in arms about ourselves, stand up for ourselves. It's God will do that. You got any thoughts on that? No. When it comes to this, there's someone that showed this in the New Testament, and that's Christ. Mm-hmm. Christ showed this same kind of meekness, and it really comes down to being willing to be a servant. Being a servant. In Philippians 2, 5 through 7, could you read that?
It says, have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men. He
emptied himself. Mm-hmm. Just some of the examples that Jesus showed of being willing to empty himself. One that I think of, they spit in his face. Mm-hmm. I have had someone spit at me before. That was horrible. And I was younger. It was when I was about 9 years old, and kids spit at me. Well, guess what? I spit back. That wasn't good. I shouldn't have done that. I should not have spit back. Did Jesus spit back? Mm-mm. He spit on his face, and he took it. Of course, my 9-year-old self retaliated because I do unto others as they've done to me. Because that's what you do on the playground. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we're taught something different. We're taught that we're to take it. Jesus was willing to do that by emptying himself. That's the only way we can do that. We have to empty ourselves. What's filled in the void? Mm-hmm. The Spirit. When we are filled with the Spirit, when we're living according to the Spirit, then that's the fruit of it. The result is gentleness. The result is this strength under control and not spitting back, not retaliating. He emptied himself. It actually goes on, it says, by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men. For him to actually be born. Can you imagine choosing to become a baby? That's what Nicodemus thought Jesus was saying when he said you need to be born again. Mm-hmm. He said, how can a man be born when he's old? Can he enter a second time in his mother's womb and be born? He literally is thinking that's the most ludicrous thought in the world, because he's thinking he has to make the choice to go back into an infancy. Can you imagine knowing that you're an infant? I mean, you're completely helpless. You're completely dependent on your parents, on everything for food and for everything. That again is a humility. Just him coming to be born. But then obviously he emptied himself in his death and dying. I mean, he didn't want to die, but he was willing to do so. So Jesus shows that example, and if we're going to be Christ-like, we must have this fruit as well. But I think it's also, since we've seen that this quality is not being overly impressed by a sense of one's self-importance, this quality is overly impressed by a sense of God's importance. See, because he emptied himself by being a servant to who? To who? God.
Right.
So we do make a stand for God, where Moses was the example of that. He didn't take a stand for himself when his family spoke against his wife, but he did make a stand when the children of Israel went against his God. This is one of the most macho, I mean, it's the only word that came to mind, for lack of a better term. One of the most powerful expressions of meekness, of strength in Exodus 32, 19 through 20.
It says, as soon as he came near the camp and saw the calf and the dancing, Moses' anger burned hot, and he threw the tablets out of his hands and broke them at the foot of the mountain. He took the calf that they had made and burned it with fire and ground it to powder and scattered it on the water and made the people of Israel drink it.
So let's unpack this. I mean, this is something, he's been up on the mountain for 40 days, and he's been receiving the law, and he's got the 10 commandments within that law on those tablets that God cut from the stone. Man, it's all coming together. Wow, we've got a plan, we've got a law. This is, God is leading us. And then he comes down and he hears the sound, not of victory from a battle, because again, it's victory that God brought them there. He said, no, this is the sound of singing and dancing, of joy. What's going on? They're sitting there and they're dancing around a calf. And leading up to this, or before this took place, the people had gone to Aaron and said, where's this Moses? For all we know, he's dead. You need to fashion a golden calf for us so that we can worship it and praise it for bringing us out of Egypt. And he said, take off your earrings. Where did they get the earrings? It was the plunder from Egypt. The plunder from Egypt. So what they gave them as they left Egypt, it's the plunder that brought us out. No. That's disgusting that they would do that. And that fashioned, into that calf. And look at what he does. Breaks the tablets. Of course, that's anger that did that. He had to go and he had to cut the tablet out himself later and have it inscribed again. But here he then grinds up the golden calf into a powder. I don't know how he went about doing that. But there's a lot of strength in this. He scattered it on the water and made the people drink it. That's well over 1 million people. And he made every single one of them drink it.
It's worse than the taste of Tylenol.
Oh, well, I mean,
the gritty sand.
It's funny.
Oh my goodness!
Growing up, we had well water, and we had a high copper content in the water. We had to filter it because it would leave a green stain if it dripped over the weekend. It would leave a green stain on the stuff.
Oh man!
Well, that's copper. That's metal in the water. Man, it's like sucking on a battery. Seriously, it would leave you just. So it would leave them with this bitter taste in their mouth for them to remember what they had done, right?
Yeah.
This is the meekest man in all the earth.
I bet they said this is not peachy.
This is not peachy. I like that. I think they would have rather had that for sure. I think they would have rather had someone who was silent in the face of this, but he was the opposite. But this is still the meekest man in all the earth.
Yeah.
So when it came to something that had been done to him, he remained silent. But when it came to something that was being done to his Creator, the God that had proved himself time and time again, Moses was willing to take what they had made as a form of God, grind it up, and make them drink it. They're drinking their God. and their God was going to make their belly hurt. He was going to make them sick. We don't have to go into all that. But that's what he was going to remind them of. This is the God that you thought brought you out of Egypt, and he's going to hurt your stomach right now. That is the definition of meekness. Yeah. Being willing to stand up for God, but not have to stand up for yourself. That takes strength. For both. So this is the same quality of Christ, and it explains why he took a whip of cords in John chapter 2 and overturned the money changers' tables in the temple. Why? Because they had turned his father's house into a den of thieves, a den of robbers. They also turned into a stable. They had the pigeons. They had or the doves. They had all of the sacrifices there in the temple. That is not what God's house is meant to be. And in fact, his apostles responded. They remembered the saying that was written about him, that the Christ would have zeal. It says, zeal for your house has eaten me up, has consumed me. He was zealous and consumed for God's house. Moses was zealous and consumed for God, and he's willing to go to those extremes. Jesus was willing to do the same. Well, God's house today is the church. And we need to be standing up for the church. But too often, I think we're like, well, I got to stand up for me and mine. Because, these are my rights as an American citizen. And we stand up for our rights where, wait a minute, we need to be standing up for the church. We need to be standing up for God. And he's being destroyed right and left by people's thoughts or people's minds and what they're saying about God. We need to stand up.
Yeah.
And that comes from the fruit of the Spirit, that is gentleness. So may we stand up for it for God's people with the fruit of gentleness.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Going through the fruits of the Spirit and getting to gentleness. I hope everyone has taken something from this, and it's gentleness. Being gentle, being kind, but standing up for what's right.
That's right.
That's what it takes.
That's right.
And
it comes as a result. It can't come. Mm-hmm. It can't come from within me. It can't come from within you or you. We've got to. When we rely on God, these things will happen. And again, it's not picking and choosing. Again, we'll talk more about that next week.
Yeah. So tune in next week if you can, and if we can, on self-control, and find out what part of the fruit bowl it is.
Yeah. What part of the fruit bowl is self-control?
I'm
looking forward to that.
It's going to be a good one.
Yeah.
If you have any questions or comments about the show here, you can reach us at richard@deerfootcoc.com. You can find us on our Facebook page at Deerfoot Church of Christ, or is it Deerfoot Disciples?
Deerfoot Church of Christ on our Facebook page. Yeah.
You can make comments there. You can find us on YouTube. Find us there on Plant and Water. And make comments there if you like. Just all kind of outreach stuff we have here. You can reach out to us and ask a question or comment on the show. We'd like to have those.
And thank you so much for joining us today. Have a good day.
God bless.